Get your hands off that locker. Don't touch anything. Filthy.
Sir, this is my locker.
Your locker? A farm boy thinks he owns something in my school. You frankly manure and smell like your kind always is.
I want you out today. Permanently. Go back to whatever dirt field your daddy works. That's all you people are good for.
The hallway is dead silent. That same afternoon, Samuel was formally expelled from school. But the very next morning, a helicopter landed in the middle of the schoolyard. What happened the very next morning, nobody in that school saw coming. Let me take you back to the beginning. Harlan County, Kentucky, early autumn. The kind of morning where the air smells like cold soil and wood smoke, and the sky is that pale gray-gold color just before the sun clears the tree line. The Moore Farm sits on the edge of town, 3,000 acres of it. Corn rows stretching so far they blur into the horizon. Irrigation lines running like silver threads across the fields. A red barn that's been standing since Samuel's grandfather built it with his own hands. Samuel is already awake. 4:55 a.m. He's in the yard, boots laced, breath fogging in the cold air. He checks the irrigation pressure on the east field, taps the gauge twice, writes something in a small notebook he keeps in his jacket pocket. Then he feeds the chickens, scatters grain in wide arcs, watching them scatter and peck. He does this every morning, without being asked, without complaint. Inside, his father Earl is at the kitchen table. Big hands wrapped around a coffee mug, a worn farm ledger open in front of him, columns of numbers filled in with careful handwriting. Earl Moore is a quiet man, the kind of quiet that comes not from having nothing to say, but from choosing carefully when to say it. Breakfast is eggs and toast. They eat without much talking. The radio plays low in the corner. Before Samuel leaves, Earl slides a $10 bill across the table for lunch. Samuel slides it back. "I'm good, Dad." Earl looks at him for a moment, then nods once, puts the bill in his shirt pocket. They drive to school in a mud-flecked pickup truck, dints in the passenger door, a crack running across the bottom of the windshield. Samuel rides with his backpack on his lap, one worn copy of The Wealth of Nations tucked between his chemistry textbook and his notebook. He reads 3 pages before they reach the school gate. Creekside Academy looks impressive from the outside. New brick facade, a marquee sign out front that reads, "Excellence in Education, every student, every day." The parking lot has a row of teachers' cars that includes 2 BMWs and a brand new Jeep. Inside, the trophy cases line the main hallway, state championships going back 20 years, academic bowls, debate titles. The faces in the photos are almost uniformly white. Samuel passes them every morning without slowing down. Creekside is 78% white. It serves a county where old money and old attitudes tend to travel together. Most people here are decent enough in the way that people can be decent when nothing is challenging them. But the institution itself, its rhythms, its assumptions, its invisible rules, was built for a specific kind of student. And everyone who didn't fit that mold learned quickly to either shrink or fight. Samuel did neither. He just worked. Top of his class in chemistry and mathematics, quiet in the hallways, polite to every teacher. He had one close friend, a lanky kid named Davis, who sat next to him in AP chemistry and shared his lunch when Samuel forgot his. His chemistry teacher, Ms. Patricia Wells, had written in his last progress report, Samuel is the most naturally gifted science student I have taught in 17 years. He thinks in systems. Then there was Gary Hartwell, 19 years as principal of Creekside Academy. The kind of man who kept his office spotless, and his prejudices spotless too. Polished, presentable, never quite provable. He gave speeches about equality at every back-to-school night. He used words like standards and culture fit and behavioral patterns in ways that always seemed to land hardest on the same students. His golden boy was Trent Holloway, senior, Letterman jacket, father on the school board. Trent had been making Samuel's life quietly miserable for 2 years. Stolen notes, shoulder checks in the hallway, whispered slurs when teachers weren't looking. Every complaint Samuel made disappeared into Hartwell's office and was never heard from again. Hartwell had been watching Samuel for 2 years, building something. Samuel just didn't know it yet. Samuel had been working on the project for 6 weeks. A soil remediation model, a working system that could pull heavy metal contamination out of degraded farmland using layered biochar and mycorrhizal networks. He'd built the prototype himself in the barn after school. Earl had helped him source the materials. Ms. Wells had stayed late 3 Tuesdays in a row to help him calibrate the measurements. It was, objectively, extraordinary work. The morning of the science fair submission deadline, Samuel arrived at school 40 minutes early, project board under one arm, data binder under the other. He found Miss Wells in her classroom, already at her desk with coffee steaming beside her keyboard. She looked up and saw what he was carrying. Her face did something complicated, proud and sad at the same time, the way a teacher's face gets when they know a student is better than the system around them. "Samuel, this is incredible work." "Thank you, Miss Wells." She stood up, walked around her desk, looked at the board carefully, read the methodology section twice, ran her finger along the data columns. "This could win state," she said quietly. "I mean that." Samuel nodded. He didn't say much, just set the board carefully against the wall and started organizing his submission paperwork. That was when Trent Holloway appeared in the doorway. He looked at Samuel's project, then at Ms. Wells, then back at Samuel. Something moved across his face, not quite jealousy, not quite hatred, something in between, cold and calculating. He left without saying anything. 15 minutes later, Samuel was called to the principal's office over the intercom. The announcement echoed through every classroom in the building, loud, public, deliberate. Samuel picked up his backpack. Ms. Wells watched him go, a small crease forming between her eyebrows. Hartwell's office smelled like coffee and carpet cleaner. Coach Dennis Albright was already sitting in the corner when Samuel arrived, arms folded, not quite meeting Samuel's eyes. Hartwell stood behind his desk. He didn't offer Samuel a seat. "Sit down," he said, like the word tasted sour. Samuel sat. Hartwell dropped a single sheet of paper on the desk, slid it forward with 2 fingers, like he didn't want to touch it any longer than necessary. "Trent Holloway filed a report this morning. Says you threatened him near the East Lockers yesterday afternoon." Samuel looked at the paper, then at Hartwell. "That didn't happen." "He says it did." "Then he's lying." Hartwell's eyes went flat. "Watch your mouth." "I'm stating a fact. I wasn't near the East Lockers yesterday afternoon. I was in Ms. Wells' classroom until 4:15. She can confirm that." Hartwell leaned back in his chair, folded his hands. "I've already spoken to Ms. Wells." He hadn't. Samuel didn't know that yet. But it was a lie delivered so smoothly, so casually, that it landed like truth. There were witnesses, Hartwell continued. Multiple students. Which students? Silence. I'd like to know which students, sir. That information is confidential. Samuel's jaw tightened. Just slightly. The only sign. Sir, I have a science fair submission due today. I've been working on this project for 6 weeks. If I miss the deadline, that's not my concern right now. It should be. This submission represents the school. Hartwell stood up, slowly, the way men stand up when they want you to remember they're bigger than you. What represents this school, he said, voice dropping low, is discipline, order, students who respect authority and know their place. He paused. Let that land. I've been watching you for 2 years, son. You walk around here like you own something, like the rules don't apply to you. I follow every rule in this school. You have an attitude problem. I have a grade point average of 3.94. Hartwell's nostrils flared. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a manila folder. Thick, stuffed. He dropped it on the desk between them. Samuel stared at it. 2 years, Hartwell said. Every incident, every complaint, every time a teacher or student reported a problem with your behavior. He tapped the folder. It's all in here. Samuel reached for the folder. Hartwell put his hand on top of it. You don't get to read it. This is an administrative file. It's a file about me. It's school property. The room was very quiet. The fluorescent light above them buzzed faintly. Coach Albright shifted in his chair, but said nothing, kept his gaze fixed on the carpet tiles. Hartwell opened the folder himself, started reading from it, out loud. November of sophomore year. Disrespectful tone during a quiz correction. March. A lunch dispute that required staff intervention. September of junior year. Failure to comply with a hallway direction. Each entry, read in Hartwell's flat, bureaucratic voice, sounded damning. Taken together, they painted a portrait of a student with a pattern of defiance. But Samuel remembered every single one of those incidents differently. The quiz correction? He'd pointed out that the answer key had an error. He'd been right. The teacher had later acknowledged it. The lunch dispute. Trent had taken his tray. Samuel had asked for it back. A staff member had intervened. No disciplinary action had been taken at the time. The hallway direction. He'd asked a teacher to clarify an instruction. That was it. Each incident rewritten. Each rewriting filed. Each filing building toward this moment. Based on this record, Hartwell said, closing the folder, and the incident reported this morning, I am recommending immediate suspension pending a formal expulsion hearing. The word hit the room like a dropped stone. Expulsion. Samuel said nothing for 3 full seconds. Then, I want my father present for any expulsion proceedings. You'll be notified of the hearing date by mail. I want to call him now. You can call from the front office after we're done here. Hartwell straightened his jacket, the same gesture from the hallway that morning. Satisfied. Final. Effective immediately, you are suspended from Creekside Academy. You are to leave the premises within the next 20 minutes. Do not go back to your locker. Do not return to Ms. Wells' classroom. Samuel looked at him steadily. My project. Leave it. 6 weeks of work. I said leave it. Hartwell walked to his office door and opened it. Security will escort you to the front entrance. Samuel stood. He picked up his backpack. He walked to the door. He stopped in the doorway, turned back once. Can I ask you something, sir? Hartwell looked at him with barely concealed irritation. Did you even read Trent's statement before you called me in here? Hartwell didn't answer. Samuel nodded slowly, like he just confirmed something he already suspected. He walked out. In the hallway, clusters of students who'd heard the intercom announcement were watching, phones out, whispering. Samuel walked straight, eyes forward, boots quiet on the linoleum. He didn't look left or right. At the front office, he called Earl. The phone rang twice. "Dad, they're expelling me." Earl's voice on the other end was very calm. "I know. Ms. Wells already called me." Samuel exhaled slowly. Outside the front office window, he could see the parking lot, the flagpole, the Creekside Academy marquee sign. Excellence in education. Every student, every day. "What do we do?" Samuel asked. A pause. The sound of Earl setting something down on a hard surface. A coffee mug, maybe. Or that farm ledger. "You come home," Earl said, "and you let me make a call." Samuel watched a crow land on top of the marquee sign, ruffle its feathers against the cold, and stare down at the empty parking lot like it owned the place. "Okay," he said. He hung up. He walked out of Creekside Academy. Behind him, in Ms. Wells' classroom, his project board was still leaning against the wall. 6 weeks of work, data columns in neat handwriting, a system that could heal damaged land. Nobody had touched it. Not yet. The expulsion hearing was scheduled for 3 days later. Earl Moore drove to the district office the morning after Samuel came home. He walked in alone, no attorney, no briefcase, just a man in clean work clothes asking to speak with someone about his son's case. The receptionist told him the superintendent was unavailable. He asked for the deputy superintendent, also unavailable. He asked for the hearing coordinator. She came out after 20 minutes. Young woman, clipboard, apologetic smile. She told Earl the hearing process was standard, the timeline was fixed, and that the school's recommendation carried significant weight. Earl thanked her politely and left. On the drive home, he made 2 phone calls. We don't know what was said in either of them. 3 days later, the hearing room was small and aggressively ordinary. Drop ceiling, fluorescent lights, a folding table with 4 chairs on one side and 2 on the other. Hartwell sat in the center, Coach Albright to his left, a district HR representative to his right. A digital recorder sat in the middle of the table, its red light blinking. Samuel and Earl sat across from them. No student advocate had been arranged, no union representative. Earl had asked about both in writing the day before. Neither request had received a response. Hartwell opened the thick manila folder. "Mr. Moore, thank you for coming. I'll keep this straightforward." He didn't look up. "Your son has a documented behavioral record spanning 2 academic years. The incident reported last Wednesday represents the latest in a pattern of concerning conduct. Based on this record, the school is recommending permanent expulsion." Earl's hands were flat on the table, completely still. "Can we see the full record?" he asked. "You'll receive a summary copy after the hearing." "I'd like to see it now, before any decision is made." Hartwell looked up for the first time. Something flickered behind his eyes, a brief recalibration. Earl's voice was quiet, unhurried, the kind of calm that's more unsettling than anger. "That's not standard procedure. My son has a right to review the evidence being used against him. This is a school administrative hearing, not a courtroom. I understand that. I'm still asking." Hartwell closed the folder, moving on. The incident report from Trent Holloway states that Samuel verbally threatened him near the East Lockers at approximately 3:40 p.m. on Tuesday. 2 students corroborated this account. Earl said, Which students? That's confidential. My son says he was in Ms. Wells' classroom until 4:15 that day. Has anyone spoken to Ms. Wells? A pause. Barely a second. But there. Ms. Wells's account is noted, Hartwell said. It wasn't an answer. Earl noted that too. I'd also like to request the security camera footage from the East Locker hallway for that afternoon, Earl said. Hartwell straightened a paper in front of him, a small, precise movement. That footage was not retained. The district's own policy requires security footage to be kept for a minimum of 30 days. There was a technical issue with that camera. When was the issue reported? Silence. Mr. Hartwell, when was the technical issue first reported to the district's IT department? Hartwell looked at the HR representative. She looked at her clipboard. Nobody answered. Earl wrote something in a small notebook he'd brought. Hartwell watched him write and said nothing. The hearing continued for another 40 minutes. Hartwell read from the file. Earl asked precise, quiet questions that Hartwell either couldn't or wouldn't answer. Coach Albright said nothing the entire time, eyes fixed on the table like it contained something fascinating. At the end, Hartwell announced the recommendation. Samuel Moore was formally expelled from Creekside Academy. Earl closed his notebook, capped his pen. "Thank you for your time," he said, and meant none of it. Outside in the parking lot, Samuel sat on the hood of the truck, hands in his jacket pockets, breath coming out in small white clouds. The sky was the color of old tin. A crow called somewhere in the tree line. Earl came out, walked to the truck, stood beside his son. They didn't speak for a long while. Then Samuel said, "The camera footage." "I know." "He deleted it." "I know." "How do we prove that?" Earl looked at the school building, at the marquee sign, at the flag snapping in the cold wind. "You let me worry about that." That evening, Samuel started the notebook. Not the small field notebook from his jacket, a new one, larger, hardcover, the kind that doesn't bend easy. He dated the first entry, wrote down everything he remembered from the hearing, exact words, exact pauses, who looked at whom when which question was asked. He paperclipped a copy of the hearing notice to the first page. Earl watched him from the kitchen doorway, said nothing, then went to bed. What happened over the next 2 weeks was quiet, methodical, and deliberately invisible. Hartwell, feeling the hearing had gone exactly as planned, moved to the next stage. He called the county's alternative education program, the only other academic option in Harlan County for an expelled student. He didn't put anything in writing. He made the call from his cell phone, late on a Friday afternoon, when the district office was empty. He told the program coordinator that Samuel Moore was a serious behavioral risk, that enrollment would create problems, that it would be better for everyone if the paperwork got delayed indefinitely. The coordinator was confused, uncomfortable. She mentioned the call 3 days later during a staff meeting attended by 6 people, including Ms. Wells. Ms. Wells went home that evening and sat with it for 2 hours. Then she took out her phone and recorded a detailed account of everything the coordinator had said. Date, time, exact words. She saved it in 3 places. She didn't tell anyone yet. She just kept it. Meanwhile, a county deputy began appearing near the Moore farm. Not stopping, not approaching, just present. A cruiser idling at the road that ran along the east fence line. Sometimes in the morning when Samuel was checking irrigation. Sometimes in the evening when Earl was closing up the barn. Engine running. Just sitting there. Samuel noticed it on the 3rd day. He took out his phone and photographed the cruiser. Time-stamped. He wrote the plate number in his notebook. He did this every single time it appeared. By the end of the second week, he had 11 entries. The pressure extended beyond the farm. The feed supplier that the Moore family had used for 11 years quietly raised their prices. Not dramatically, just enough to sting, just enough to be noticed. No explanation given. Earl called and asked, was told it was a supply chain adjustment. Earl wrote it down. The diner on Main Street that had served the Moore family since Samuel was 6 years old suddenly introduced a reservation system. Walk-ins weren't being accommodated. Earl tried on a Tuesday evening. Full, they said. He could see 4 empty tables through the window. He came back Thursday. Full again. Same empty tables. He didn't argue. He wrote it down. A woman at the hardware store who'd chatted with Earl for years suddenly found reasons to be busy when he walked in. A neighbor who'd waved from his truck every morning for a decade started looking straight ahead when he passed the farm gate. None of it was dramatic. None of it was provable. Each piece by itself was deniable. Together, it was a message, delivered slowly and deliberately. We can make your world here very, very small. Samuel kept writing in his notebook. 11 entries became 19. 19 became 26. Every incident dated, every detail recorded. The plate numbers, the times, the names of businesses, the names of people. A quiet, meticulous architecture of everything being done to his family. Earl kept making phone calls, always in the evenings, after Samuel was at the table writing. Always brief, always in a voice too low to hear from the next room. And then one evening, Earl came to the kitchen table and sat across from his son. He didn't say anything at first, just slid a manila envelope across the table. Samuel opened it slowly. Inside were documents, financial records, corporate filings spanning 3 states, land registry papers, a letter on heavy cream paper with an official seal pressed into the corner. Samuel read for a long time without speaking. The kitchen was very quiet. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, wind moved through the corn rows with a sound like distant water. When Samuel finally looked up, Earl was watching him with an expression caught between sorrow and something harder, something that had been waiting a long time. "You knew this whole time," Samuel said. "Why didn't you just—" "Because you needed to see it first," Earl said quietly. "The way they treat you when they think you have nothing, when they think you can't fight back." He folded his hands on the table. "Now you've seen it. All of it. Every piece of it." Samuel looked back down at the documents. "And now?" he asked. Earl stood, pushed his chair in carefully, picked up his coffee mug. "Now," he said, "we stop being quiet." He walked to the kitchen window. Outside, the farm stretched out into the dark, 3,000 acres of it, silent and enormous under a sky full of cold stars. Samuel picked up his pen and kept writing. The call went out at 7:09 a.m. Not a phone call, not an email. A sound. Low at first, a distant thrum that didn't belong to anything Harlan County made on a Tuesday morning. Not a tractor, not a truck engine. Something heavier, something rhythmic and approaching fast. Students in the parking lot heard it first. Heads tilted up. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. A girl dropped her coffee cup and didn't notice. The sound grew until it wasn't just heard, it was felt. A vibration in the chest, in the fillings of teeth, in the soles of feet on cold asphalt. Then It cleared the tree line. A helicopter, corporate black, no markings visible yet, moving with the kind of deliberate, unhurried authority that private aircraft carry when they aren't asking anyone's permission to land. It descended toward Creekside Academy's football field. Students poured out of the building. Teachers appeared in doorways. Coach Albright walked out of the gymnasium and stood with his hand shading his eyes, mouth slightly open. The secretary from the front office came outside, still holding a stapler. The helicopter landed. The rotor wash flattened the grass in wide, perfect circles. The noise was enormous, and then, as the blades slowed, suddenly it wasn't. A strange silence settled over the entire school. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The door opened. Earl Moore stepped out. He was wearing a dark suit, charcoal gray, no tie, but the kind of suit that doesn't need one. His shoes were clean. His posture was the same as always, unhurried, upright, completely at ease. Behind him came two attorneys in matching navy jackets, carrying document cases. Then a woman in a Department of Education windbreaker, a badge clipped to her front pocket. Then a man in a dark overcoat, who several people would later recognize from television, a senior aide to the state governor, though nobody in the parking lot knew that yet. They walked across the football field toward the school's main entrance. The crowd of students parted without being asked. Hartwell had been informed of the helicopter by his secretary. He was standing in the front office when Earl walked through the door, and for just a moment, one unguarded, visible moment, his face showed something he couldn't quite control. Not fear exactly. Recognition. The particular recognition of a man who has just understood that he badly miscalculated something. He recovered quickly, straightened, crossed his arms. "Mr. Moore, you can't just—" "Good morning, Gary." Earl's voice was pleasant. He didn't slow down. "We'll use your conference room." They used his conference room. Hartwell sat at the head of the table out of habit. Earl sat across from him. The attorneys placed their document cases on the table and opened them in unison. The Department of Education representative stood near the window, arms folded, watching. One of the attorneys slid a large envelope across the table. "This is a formal legal notice of civil rights violations filed against Creekside Academy and Gary Hartwell individually," she said. "You'll want to read page 3 first." Hartwell didn't touch the envelope. "I don't know what you think you're doing," he said. "This is a routine disciplinary matter involving a student with a documented—" The second attorney opened a laptop and turned it to face Hartwell. On the screen, security camera footage. Clear. Time-stamped. The East Locker Hallway, 3:40 p.m. on a Tuesday. Samuel Moore was not in it. The hallway was empty except for two students walking in the opposite direction, neither of them Trent Holloway. Hartwell stared at the screen. "That footage was corrupted," he said. "There was a technical—" "It was recovered from a district backup server by a third-party forensic firm," the attorney said. "Hired 6 days ago. The deletion was logged, time-stamped, and traced." The room was very quiet. The first attorney reached into her document case again, pulled out a printed transcript. "This is a recorded account from Miss Patricia Wells, detailing a staff meeting conversation in which the Alternative Education Program Coordinator disclosed that she received a phone call from a Creekside administrator instructing her to delay Samuel Moore's enrollment indefinitely." Another document. "This is a sworn statement from a feed supplier in Harlan County, confirming that he received a phone call from someone identifying themselves as a school board member, suggesting he raise prices for the Moore family account." Another. "And this is a log, photographs, timestamps, and license plate records, documenting 11 separate instances of a county deputy vehicle idling near the Moore Farm property line over a 14-day period. Each document landed on the table like a stone dropped into still water. Hartwell's face had gone through several phases. Now it was simply still. The way a face goes still when the body underneath it is trying to calculate something and finding no calculation that works. The Department of Education representative stepped forward. Mr. Hartwell, I'm serving you with a formal notice of federal investigation, civil rights violations, destruction of public records, tortious interference with a minor's educational access. She placed the notice directly in front of him. I'd recommend you contact an attorney. Outside the conference room window, Samuel Moore stood in the parking lot. He hadn't arrived by helicopter. He'd driven with Miss Wells in her car, the same way he came to school every morning. He was watching through the glass doors of the main entrance when his father walked back out of the conference room. Earl crossed the hallway, pushed through the front doors, walked down the steps. He looked at his son across the parking lot. He nodded once. Samuel nodded back. Hartwell walked out of the conference room 11 minutes later. He didn't look like the same man who had stood in that hallway 4 weeks ago and told a 17-year-old boy to go back to his field. The pressed button-down was the same. The lanyard was the same. But something behind his eyes had collapsed inward, quietly, like a structure losing its load-bearing wall. His secretary watched him cross the front office, looked away. He stopped in the middle of the room, cleared his throat. "This is all a misunderstanding," he said. To no one in particular, to everyone. I have run this school for 19 years. My record speaks for itself. Whatever allegations are being made, I can assure you that every decision I made regarding Samuel Moore was made in accordance with district policy and in the best interest of this school's academic environment. The Department of Education representative was standing 6 feet away. She didn't respond. One of Earl's attorneys wrote something on a notepad. Hartwell's voice tightened. I was following procedure. I had documented evidence. I had witness statements. If there are questions about the camera footage, that's an IT matter, not a... Mr. Hartwell. The attorney looked up from her notepad. Her voice was pleasant and completely final. I'd strongly recommend you stop talking without legal counsel present. Hartwell stopped talking. Coach Albright had appeared in the hallway outside the conference room during the last few minutes of the meeting. He'd heard enough. He stood now with his back against the wall, arms crossed, staring at the floor tiles. When the Department of Education representative stepped into the hallway and asked if he'd been present during the original expulsion hearing, he answered without hesitation. Yes. And were you present in the main hallway on the morning Principal Hartwell made verbal remarks to Samuel Moore in front of students? A pause. 3 seconds. 4. Yes, Albright said. I was. Did you hear what was said? He looked up, not at the representative, at the window at the end of the hallway, where gray autumn light was coming through in thin strips. I heard everything, he said quietly. I should have said something a long time ago. By 11:15 a.m., the county superintendent had been reached by phone. By 11:40, he had driven to Creekside Academy personally. He arrived to find 2 news vans already parked on the street outside. Someone had called Diane Calloway at the regional NBC affiliate, and she had arrived with a camera operator before anyone in the district's communications office had been notified. At 11:55 a.m., Gary Hartwell was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. The HR representative from the district handed him the notice in the front office. 2 people witnessed it. Hartwell read it twice, folded it once, and put it in his jacket pocket with the careful, deliberate movements of a man trying very hard to appear composed. He was escorted to his car by the district HR officer. Not in handcuffs, not yet, but watched. Quietly, firmly watched. Every step across the parking lot to his vehicle. He drove away without looking back. Trent Holloway was called to the guidance office at 12:30 p.m. District investigators had already begun interviewing students about the locker incident. Within 2 hours, 3 separate students, independently, without coordination, confirmed that Trent had fabricated the threat allegation entirely. One of them, a sophomore girl named Abby, said she'd watched Trent write the statement at the lunch table and had felt sick about it ever since. Trent's parents were contacted. Their attorney instructed Trent not to speak further. The school board member, who was Trent's uncle, issued a written recusal from all more related proceedings at 1:15 p.m. The recusal noted a, quote, potential conflict of interest. It did not explain why that conflict had not been identified 4 weeks earlier when the expulsion was first recommended. Nobody asked him to explain. Not yet. At 3:30 p.m., the acting superintendent signed a formal reversal of Samuel Moore's expulsion. His academic record was cleared, completely and retroactively. The manufactured behavioral file was flagged for review. At 3:45 p.m., Ms. Wells called Samuel. "It's done," she said. "You're reinstated. Come back whenever you're ready." Samuel was sitting on the fence line of the east field when the call came. The afternoon light was long and gold across the corn rows. The irrigation lines caught it and threw it back in bright, scattered pieces. He listened, said thank you, hung up. Then he sat there for a while longer, just breathing. The story should have ended there. It didn't. Diane Calloway's first segment aired that evening on the regional NBC affiliate. 90 seconds. Restrained, factual, precise. Helicopter landing on school football field. Federal civil rights investigation. Principal placed on administrative leave. Student's expulsion reversed same day. 90 seconds was enough. By midnight, the clip had been shared 40,000 times. By the following morning, 3 national outlets had picked it up. By noon, Creekside Academy's main phone line had received over 200 calls from journalists, civil rights organizations, and members of the public. The district's communications office, which had 1 part-time staffer, was completely overwhelmed before 9 a.m. The story had escaped Harlan County. The federal investigation moved faster than anyone in the district expected. The Department of Education's Civil Rights Division doesn't move fast as a rule, but the forensic evidence was unusually clean. The deleted footage, recovered with a precise timestamp of deletion. The backup server log, showing the deletion occurred 14 hours after the expulsion hearing. The cell tower data, placing Hartwell's personal phone near the gas station where a burner phone was purchased. The same burner phone used to call the county deputy and initiate the drive-by surveillance of the Moore farm. Each thread, pulled carefully, unraveled the next. The investigation also expanded in a direction nobody had publicly anticipated. Investigators reviewing Hartwell's behavioral file system, the same thick manila folder he'd been building on Samuel for 2 years, found that the methodology wasn't new. They pulled records going back 6 years. They found 3 other students, all black, all pushed out of Creekside Academy through the same manufactured documentation process. A sophomore named James, who'd transferred mid-year after a fabricated cheating accusation. His mother had fought it for 3 months, been told the record was final, and eventually moved her family to the next county. A junior named Darius, who'd been suspended so many times on minor infractions that he'd simply stopped coming. He'd never officially dropped out. His file just showed a long series of absences that nobody had followed up on. He was 19 now, working at a loading dock 2 towns over. A freshman named Caleb, who'd lasted 4 months at Creekside before his parents transferred him to a private school they could barely afford because they couldn't prove what was happening, but they could feel it clearly enough. Investigators contacted all 3 families. All 3 families agreed to be interviewed. The story that had started as one expelled teenager and a helicopter became something larger and uglier and more important. Hartwell was charged on 3 counts: obstruction of educational access under federal civil rights statute, destruction of public records, and conspiracy to interfere with a minor's enrollment rights. The school board member, Trent's uncle, Gerald Holloway, was charged as a co-conspirator in the alternative education program interference. The county deputy who'd conducted the farm surveillance was investigated separately. He claimed he'd acted on an anonymous tip. The tip was traced to the burner phone. The burner phone was traced back to Hartwell. The trial was 4 months later. The courtroom in downtown Harlan was standing room only every single day. Hartwell's attorney argued selective prosecution, argued that the civil rights framing was politically motivated, argued that a 19-year record of service to the community should carry weight. He used words like dedicated educator and misunderstanding and disproportionate response in every possible combination. The jury, 8 women and 4 men, 3 of whom were black, listened carefully to all of it. They deliberated for less than a day. Hartwell was convicted on 2 of 3 counts. The conspiracy charge regarding the alternative education program interference was the one that stuck hardest, alongside the destruction of public records. The obstruction charge carried a federal sentencing enhancement because of the involvement of a minor's civil rights. Attorney General Howard Barnes stood at the courthouse steps afterward and read from a prepared statement. His voice was level and unhurried. No child's future should be erased by one man's contempt. What happened to Samuel Moore, and to James, and to Darius, and to Caleb was not a series of administrative errors. It was a system, built deliberately, operated patiently, and aimed precisely at children who had done nothing wrong except exist in a school that was supposed to serve them. He paused. That system is now on the record, and it will be answered. Hartwell received 18 months, suspended after 6, with 5 years probation. His educator's license was permanently revoked. A civil judgment awarded damages to the Moore family and to the 3 previously affected students. Amounts the court record describes only as substantial. The school board was restructured under a federal consent decree requiring independent civil rights oversight for 5 years and mandatory review of all behavioral files generated during Hartwell's tenure. Gerald Holloway resigned from the school board the morning the verdict was read. He released a 1-sentence statement through his attorney. It did not contain the word sorry. Trent Holloway was not criminally charged. He was 17, and the false report, while damaging, didn't meet the threshold for criminal prosecution. But the report was entered into the official school disciplinary record. His college applications, already submitted to 4 schools, were reviewed in light of the public record. 2 schools rescinded their offers by certified letter. Trent said nothing publicly. And then, 6 weeks after the verdict, on a cold Saturday morning in a convention center in Lexington, Kentucky, Samuel Moore stood at a podium in front of 400 people. The state science fair. His soil remediation project, the one Ms. Wells had protected, submitted, and shepherded through the process while Samuel couldn't set foot on school grounds, had advanced through every round. He won. First place, Senior Division, Physical Sciences. The trophy was heavy and slightly ugly, the way trophies often are. Samuel held it with both hands and looked out at the audience. "I want to thank Miss Wells," he said, "my father, and everyone who kept a record." The audience applauded. Most of them didn't know, yet, what that last line meant. In the back of the room, Earl Moore stood with his arms folded and his chin up, and an expression on his face that was not quite a smile, but was something better than one. A look that had been a long time coming. 6 months later, Harlan County looked mostly the same. The corn rows on the Moore farm were gold again, the way they get every autumn, stretching out to the tree line in long, quiet rows. The barn Earl's grandfather built was still standing. The irrigation lines still caught the morning light and threw it back in scattered pieces. Some things had changed. Ms. Patricia Wells was promoted to department head at Creekside Academy's newly restructured science program. On her first day in the new role, she moved Samuel's soil remediation project board, the one she'd protected for 4 months, from the storage closet where she'd been keeping it and hung it on the wall outside her classroom. Underneath it, she taped a small card. It read, "First place, State Science Fair, Samuel Moore." It's still there. James, the sophomore who'd been forced to transfer 3 years earlier, received a formal letter of apology from the Creekside Academy district. Signed by the new superintendent. Specific, unambiguous. His mother read it at her kitchen table and cried for 20 minutes. Then she framed it. Not because it fixed anything, because it was the first time anyone in that building had told the truth about what happened to her son. Darius, the junior who'd quietly disappeared into a long string of absences, was contacted by the district's new Civil Rights Oversight Office. He was 19, working a loading dock job, and had not been inside a school in 2 years. The settlement he received allowed him to enroll in a community college program the following spring. He's studying environmental science. He says he wants to work on soil remediation. He'd never heard of Samuel Moore when he enrolled. He found out later. He sent Samuel a message through Ms. Wells. It said only, "Thank you for keeping the record." Samuel Moore enrolled at the University of Kentucky on a full academic scholarship in the fall. Agricultural Sciences and Economics, double major. He still wakes up before 5, still checks things methodically, still carries a notebook. The feed supplier's prices returned to normal after the trial. Earl continued using him because the farm needed reliable supply chains more than it needed gestures. Earl is practical that way. The Moore family never went back to the diner on Main Street, not out of anger. Earl just found he didn't miss it. Hartwell served 4 months before a medical furlough reduced his sentence. His educator's license remains permanently revoked. He will never run a school again. That part is permanent. The last image is not the helicopter, not the courtroom, not the trophy. It's Samuel at the kitchen table, the night before he leaves for university. Notebook open, pen in hand, writing the final entry, dating it carefully, closing the cover. He sets it on the table, looks at it for a moment, then picks up a new one and opens it to the first page. Because that's who he is, he doesn't stop keeping the record. He just starts a new volume. So here's what I want to ask you, and I genuinely want to hear your answer in the comments below. If you had been standing in that hallway the morning Hartwell said what he said, and you had your phone in your hand, would you have hit a record? Because that one decision, one person choosing to document instead of scroll past, that's where justice starts. Drop your answer below. Share this if it hit different for you. And if you want more stories like this one, you already know what to do.